If you've just started playing Dead by Daylight, or maybe even have a couple of hundred hours, this video is designed to help you become a better player. From things as simple as how to do gens more efficiently, all the way up to tricks that will stop the killer from hitting you entirely. Although this video is geared towards newer survivors, there's a ton of things in here that will help you become a better killer player as well. So let's not waste any more time and get right into it. To start simple, this is the basic rundown of how a match works. 4 survivors load into a trial against a killer. The goal as survivor is to repair 5 generators as a team, which will power the exit gates. You can then open the exit gates and ideally get everyone out. The killer, of course, is going to try and stop you. If they manage to catch you and down you, most killers will put you on a hook. Your team does, however, have the ability to unhook you, and if you get hooked 3 times, you're dead. Your goal is to avoid the killer, repair the gens, and get out. Before we get into the actual trial though, we need to talk about what you can do before the game even starts. Every character in the game has 3 perks, which are special abilities that help in different areas in the game. You can unlock most of them for free, however some of them are locked behind licensed characters that you do have to pay for. To start out though, the survivor Meg Thomas has arguably 2 of the best perks in the game, and her 3rd one is decent too. Her best perk is Sprint Burst. This will let you run at 150% of your normal speed for a few seconds, which is really useful to get away from the killer. Her 2nd best perk is Adrenaline. When all 5 gens are completed, you instantly heal yourself if you're injured, and go a lot faster for a few seconds. Her last perk is Quick and Quiet, which is decent. It silences the loud noises that come from things like rushed actions, which I'll touch more on later. I'd recommend playing Meg and leveling her up as much as you can to unlock her perks on other survivors too. Survivors and killers also have a 4th perk slot, even though they only have 3 perks assigned to the character itself. This slot can be used on the general perks that you unlock through leveling up. These perks are on everyone by default. I won't go over what all of them do, but I'll put some of the better ones up on screen now. Now that perks are out of the way, something also worth mentioning is items. As you level up a survivor, you unlock different items of different rarities. Things such as medkits to heal yourself, toolboxes to do gens faster, and maps to help find things easier. You'll learn what each of these do as you play, and it's not super important to pay attention to right now, so I just recommend putting on a medkit for an extra free heal each match. You've heard me mention leveling up, but I haven't actually explained how that works yet. This is the bloodweb, the place where you get everything you need as a survivor. Every time you play a match of DBD, you get blood points at the end of it. You can spend those blood points here. You can also get a bonus 100,000 blood points from completing the tutorial, so make sure you do that first. On the bloodweb, better items and perk tiers are more expensive and take more time to unlock. You can also get add-ons for your items to make them stronger, or offerings to bring into the trial to give you some added benefit in the match. If any of that was confusing, don't worry. Understanding it isn't super important. As long as you put the blood points you get back into it, you'll be fine. You can level up your bloodweb all the way to level 50, which then lets you prestige your character. Once you prestige a survivor, it resets you back to level 1 and unlocks their 3 unique perks at level 1 for every survivor automatically. Once you get your character to prestige 3, their perks will be unlocked automatically for everyone at their max level. Your overall goal is to get every survivor to P3 so you can use their perks on anyone. However, once you prestige once, that is enough for their perks to show up in other survivors' bloodwebs as options to upgrade. As a rule of thumb though, you should always P3 the survivors with the perks you like the most. Meg would be a great P3 to start with since her perks are so strong. Now that you've ideally completed the tutorial, gotten some perks and items, and know the basics of how progression works, it's time to go over how a DBD match usually plays out for survivors. This will be drastically different based off whether or not you're playing with friends. I highly recommend queuing with friends if you have the opportunity to. However, I'll be going off of the solo queue experience for this video. When you load into a match, you want to do your best to work on a generator as fast as possible. The killer should spawn pretty far from you, so you're safe to run and find a gen nearby. The killer will probably find one of your teammates or you relatively early. When the killer catches whoever they're chasing, most killers will hook said survivor. It's important to pay attention to how many times someone's been hooked, since after 3 hooks, they die. The way a DBD match should go is usually a couple of gens popping for a couple of hooks. While your team is getting chased, you should be working on gens, and vice versa, hopefully. You'll notice not everyone will do this early on though. A lot of survivors play a lot more immersed in the beginning. You can't control what they do, but you can control yourself and make sure that you don't make the same mistakes they do. do. As you get better though, you'll get better teammates and it'll be way less of an issue. A perfectly balanced DBD match should end with 2 survivors escaping by completing all of the generators and the killer managing to kill the other 2. Of course, you'll have matches where all the survivors die or all the survivors escape. There's no single way a match can go, but you'll start to notice a general theme as you play more. Some of the more important things to pay attention to on screen are your teammates' icons and the gen icon. Obviously, you want all 5 gens to be complete, so you can play differently based off of how many gens are left. However, if you pay attention to your team's icon, you can actually tell when they're being chased. You'll notice claw marks pop up and start to pulse around anyone who's in chase. If you notice this, then you're probably able to work on a gen confidently, since you know the killer is busy with somebody else. Make sure you make the most out of your team's chase time, since literally every second matters in this game. It won't always make the difference in the end, but when it does, you'll be thankful you didn't waste any time. Speaking of making the most out of your time, not everything has to happen immediately. If someone gets hooked close to you, but you're close to finishing a gen, you have a full 70 seconds before you have to rescue them. Now of course, you don't want to always leave it to the last second, because the killer might come back and camp it at the end to confirm the second state, but it is still a good rule of thumb to make the most out of the hook time your teammates have. Likewise, you don't always have to heal when unhooking a survivor. Sometimes it's better to split up and work on different generators rather than waste the time healing just to get injured again later. Another mechanic I haven't mentioned until now is skill checks. Skill checks happen when you're working on a generator, healing a survivor, or on the second hook stage. It's a small timing minigame that you have to hit in order to not regress whatever action you're doing. It also lets the killer know the location of a failed skill check. Some survivor perks change skill checks and make them reward you for hitting them more accurately. Some killer perks also affect skill checks and can make them a lot harder to hit and more punishing if you miss them. For now, just worry about hitting the standard skill checks, and as you play more, you'll learn more about the specific interactions. Now, to touch more on the chase aspect of the game, we'll talk about scratch marks. Scratch marks are bright red lines that show up behind you when you sprint. Walking hides these from the killer at the expense of you moving much slower. If you ever need to stealth, keep in mind when the last time you ran was and do your best to walk away from the area where your scratch marks were. Speaking of chase, you're going to realize really fast that there's a huge difference in how killers can chase you. The most basic type of killer is referred to as an M1 killer, where primarily their only way of injuring you is with their left click basic attack. They usually have other tools to help them, like traps or poison to slow you down, but they typically don't have mobility or a way to down you from range. M2 killers are the types of killers that have powers that can injure you in unique ways, usually either relating to range or mobility. Some examples being Huntress, who can throw hatchets at you from a distance, with the disadvantage of being slower than the other killers. Then there's killers like Nurse, who can go through walls really fast anytime she wants and rock your shit. We don't talk about Nurse though. You'll learn as you play the ways to counter each killer and what's best to do and not to do. Don't get discouraged though. In the beginning, most killers will be M1 and you won't have to deal with the super complicated mechanics. Every killer in the game has a terror radius, meaning an area around the killer that plays music when you're in range. As the killer gets closer, this music gets louder. This is primarily the game's way of letting you know when the killer is nearby, and you can trust it for the most part. Some killers or perks let killers hide their terror radius or make you oblivious to it, but that's not a huge issue as long as you're paying attention to your surroundings. Just make sure when you're on a gen and things are quiet, you're looking around just in case. Another thing that accompanies the terror radius is the red stain. This is a mechanic that shows where the killer is looking in the form of a red mark in front of them. This mark makes it way easier to see them before they see you, and you can also use this to have a better time looping, but that's a topic for later on. Just make sure you remember that the way the red stain is facing is the way that the killer is looking. Now that we've briefly touched on how the killers work, this is how to actually escape from them. You have two main resources when being chased by the killer: pallets and windows. Pallets are a lot stronger than windows, since the only way the killer can get through it is by breaking it or going the long way around it. Windows can also be strong, but killers also have the ability to vault windows, just a lot slower than survivors can. When you're first starting out in DBD and the killer starts chasing you, your best bet is to run to a pallet or window as fast as you can and drop it or vault it. This will buy a lot more time than if you try to hide and fail or try and loop it and die immediately. I'm not saying you shouldn't try to get good at looping, but when you first start out, get in the habit of making it to a safe resource when the killer is on you, and dropping a pallet if needed. You can also hide in lockers to try and avoid the killer, but I don't recommend this. If you're injured, they'll be able to hear you, and if you fast fall into a locker by holding run, then it will give the killer the same notification it gives them when you fail a skill check. Overall, lockers are just not worth utilizing when first starting out. Speaking of pallets, there's a few different types. Remember how I mentioned a killer has to break a pallet or go around it? Well, there's some pallets on the map called god pallets, usually placed in a choke or a tight hallway, where the killer has no choice but to break it if they want to chase you. These pallets are by far the strongest in the game, and you should be careful when you use them, since there's only a limited amount. The two other types of pallets are safe and unsafe pallets. A safe pallet usually means if you drop it, you can sit at the pallet until the killer starts to break it, and then run. If the killer tries to wrap around the other side, you can usually vault the down pallet before the killer can hit you. Just make sure you hold run while vaulting it, so you do a fast vault and not a slow vault. Unsafe pallets are the type of pallets that don't have enough distance around the edges, so a killer can easily walk around it or double back to hit you when you vault. You ideally want to use these pallets to create distance and not as a source of safety. I mentioned fast vaulting, so now is a good time to explain the different options you have for vaulting. On a pallet, as I said, you can hold run and vault to do a quick slide over the pallet. This will alert the killer and give the same notification a failed skill check does. You can also vault without holding run to slow vault, which takes longer but is better if the killer doesn't know where you are. Windows are a bit cooler, in which you have 3 different options when vaulting. The normal slow vault, of course, and a faster vault when you hold run. However, there's a third type of vault that's much faster. If you run at the window from the right angle, you can do an even faster vault and get to the other side in half the time. Some tiles have really difficult fast vault angles, but most windows are set up in a way where you want the majority of your vaults to be fast vaults. Of course, this also gives a noise notification to the killer, but you'll mainly be using medium and fast vaults in chase, so that doesn't matter too much. Now that the chase mechanics are covered, what actually happens when you get caught and hooked? When you get hooked for the first time, you have 70 seconds before you hit your second hook stage. For the first hook stage, you just kinda hang out. After 70 seconds of not being unhooked, or being unhooked and then hooked again, it will put you into the second hook stage, where you have to hit skill checks to stay alive. Every missed skill check also lowers the time you have left before you die. Getting hooked again after this is the end of the game for you. Also, while you're on your first hook, you'll have the option to attempt to escape if a luck offering is in play. Even with the luck offerings, you only have about a 4% chance of unhooking yourself successfully, and it removes about a third of your current hook time left for every failed attempt. It's typically not worth it, and I would not recommend trying to escape by yourself. There's 2 hidden mechanics as well for being hooked. If the killer is camping you and isn't letting anyone get close to save you, as long as no survivors are in chase, an anti-camping bar will fill up, and if it reaches full, you're able to unhook yourself for free. This is to prevent the killer from just waiting the 70 seconds to get an extra stage on you for free. Now, once you're unhooked, either by a teammate or by yourself, you'll have the endurance status effect for about 10 seconds, meaning if the killer hits you, you'll get the speed of being hit by the killer, but you won't go down. This is to help prevent tunneling out one survivor. This will also put you into the deep wound state, which starts a slow timer that goes down when you're not sprinting. Once it goes all the way down, you go down. You can stand still and mend to get out of the deep wound timer though. The endurance you get is great. However, a lot of killers are aware of it and may try and wait the 10 seconds for it to run out before hitting you, or just hit you and keep chasing you. If this happens, your best bet is to find the nearest pallet or window. Unfortunately, sometimes this is unavoidable and a killer will target you until you're dead. Don't let it discourage you, just learn from it and go next. Even if you were in a situation where there was nothing you could have done differently, there's always something you can learn. Like why you should DC against every Chucky you play against. Quickly before we get into the next segment, thank you all so much for 10k. This is a milestone I never would have expected to hit a few years ago. This is monumental to me, and I'm eternally grateful for all of you. However, the grind isn't done yet, and my next big goal is to hit 20k before the end of this year. So if you learned anything new from this video, please drop a sub, as it would really help support me and the channel. Now back to the video. In every match, you may notice one survivor has bigger chase claws around them. This means they're the obsession. This mechanic doesn't really mean anything on its own. However, the killer and survivors both have perks that can benefit from either being the obsession or from chasing the obsession. This isn't a super important thing to pay attention to, but it's just a good thing to be aware of. Another minor addition to trials are totems. Each trial starts with 5 totems hidden throughout the map. Survivors can cleanse these totems to get rid of them, or bless them with special boon perks to give area of effect abilities. The killer can snuff these by stepping on them though. Killers can also bring perks that hex these totems, giving them a strong advantage until the totem is cleansed by a survivor. There are some killer hex perks that trick you into cleansing a totem, and then it gives the killer an even stronger buff for a short time. However, that is usually pretty rare, and it's still a safe bet to cleanse any glowing orange totem you see. Another smaller detail worth mentioning is you can actually save your teammates when they get picked up by the killer. If the killer picks up under a pallet, you can drop the pallet on the killer when the pickup animation is finished to stun them, forcing them to drop the survivor in the injured state. If you do this too early though, it won't stun and it won't save your teammate. So make sure the animation is completely finished before you drop the pallet, but you also want to make sure they don't have enough time to get away from the pallet either. So you want to find that sweet spot in the middle. You can also blind them with a flashlight or flashbang to force the killer to drop the survivor. There's a bit more of a precise timing for those though. I'd recommend looking up a tutorial for flashbang timing if you're interested, since it can be really fun and save some matches. Alright, now that all 5 gens are done, the exit gates are powered. Every map has 2 exit gates, and the spawns are random. If you interact with one for 20 seconds, it will open and the entire team can leave. There are some killer perks though that make it take longer to open or block the gates from being opened for a little while. And there's some survivor perks that will show you the aura of exit gates or let you open them faster. Simple enough concept, but still worth mentioning. There are 2 primary ways to escape as a survivor. You can go through the gates, as I mentioned, or you can go through the hatch. The hatch spawns randomly throughout the map when you're the last survivor alive. The killer can close this though if they find it before you. Once the killer closes the hatch, this powers both gates and starts the endgame collapse. When the gates are opened or the hatch is closed, the endgame collapse starts and you have 2 minutes to leave before the game kills you. If a survivor is on hook or downed, this timer goes 2 times slower. So if you have 1 minute left on the timer, it will turn into 2, and 2 minutes turn into 4. Not super important, but just make sure you make it out before the time runs out. Now that you have a good enough understanding of how the game works, I'll go over some optional things you can learn to be a much better survivor. This isn't stuff you need to do right away, but you do need to eventually, and the earlier you do, the more ahead you'll be in your matches. First up is looking behind you while the killer is chasing you. If you're mechanically comfortable enough, you can look at an area in front of you, or a pallet loop, and then move your camera to face the killer while you run away. This way you can keep the most distance on them and not give any chance for them to cut you off. This also helps you gauge whether or not you need to throw a pallet or loop it a few more times, based off of how far the killer is away from you. Another high skill thing you can do is practice being comfortable when the killer is nearby. If the killer is chasing someone close to you while you're on a gen, but you have a pallet close enough to you, be confident in your ability and stay on the gen until the killer gets close enough that you may get hit. If the killer does come your way while you're on the gen, you should have a pallet nearby that you can use. However, if you don't have any pallets or windows, it's perfectly fine to play more cautiously when the killer's nearby. If you want to be the sweatiest of sweatiest for survivors though, every map has clock callouts to tell your team exactly where you are and where the killer is. You do not need this though. Please do not spend time learning this, and please do not try and play this game competitively until you have at least 1,000 hours. This is not me saying that you won't be good enough until you have 1,000 hours in the game, but trust me, you'll thank me later. Another minor thing to mention, some maps in the game are heavily favored towards killer or towards survivor, whether that be because of more pallets or because the gens are really close together. You'll learn this as you play more, but it's not something super important to pay attention to when you're first starting off. One other thing that every map has, at least every map that's not indoor, is the shack and the main building. The shack has a god pallet and a really strong window. You'll hear most good survivors worship this place and yell at you for dropping the pallet early. However, every main building is different depending on what map you're on. The layout inside the main buildings are always the exact same, but they have different window and pallet spawns depending on what variant you get. Real quick as well, I'm going to go over some of the common abbreviations and brain rot slang and what they mean, so you'll be able to keep up when YouTubers or other people around you mention these terms. NOED refers to the perk Hex No One Escapes Death. After all 5 gens pop, a totem lights up, making all survivors exposed. Barbecue refers to the perk Barbecue and Chili, the Bubba perk that reveals faraway survivors when the killer hooks someone. 99ing refers to getting a heal or the exit gate to 99% for one reason or another, typically so that the endgame collapse doesn't start. Beamer or bang both refer to flashlight and flashbang respectively. Kobeing refers to when you take your 4% chance to escape from a hook and you actually make it off. Stick Dick is an evil survivor medkit add-on that lets you give yourself the endurance status effect for a few seconds. Going next means giving up on hook or in chase so you can play a new match. Swift means survive with friends, usually just meaning people that are queued together in game. Pop refers to a killer perk that gives extra aggression to a generator when kicked after the killer hooks someone. BM refers to someone being toxic or having bad manners. Vami is plague. To close us off, one of the best ways to get better at Dead by Daylight is watching people who are a good play. If you're interested in watching strong survivor looping, check out Jakage, BrainDBD, or SignDBD. If you're more interested in learning about the techs or movement or just how to generally improve, I'd recommend Otstarva, this video by Corcade, or some of the other videos on my channel. I hope you enjoyed and learned something new. I'll see you in the next one.